Hello, Wonderhussy here at everyone's favorite ghost town, Rhyolite. Rhyolite is a really popular ghost town. It's in Death Valley National Park, in that little corner of Death Valley that extends into the state of Nevada. Most of Death Valley is in California, but there's a little tiny corner of it in Nevada. And Rhyolite is pretty much the main reason people come into that little corner at all. I mean, at one time, this was a pretty significant town. Oh gosh, there was thousands of people living here. There was this, well, you can see there's ruins of some multi-story stone buildings. There was a really fancy train depot that served 3 different railroads. This was the boomtown of all boomtowns. And well, you've maybe heard about the train depot or the fancy bank buildings, or there's another famous house that's made out of glass bottles. Like I said, it's a really well-known ghost town, and well, a lot of people have been here. Now, I've actually already made a video about Rhyolite, although it was several years ago and the production values probably weren't very good. But I did. I came here and I poked around the old railroad depot and the old bank buildings and the old bottle cottage and the old jail. But you know, after I did my video, years after I did my video, I read about something else here in Rhyolite that I somehow didn't know about. A very quirky, unique attraction, you might say, that's, well, it's sort of off color, but apparently it's really something to see. There's a lone prostitute's grave somewhere out in the desert outside Rhyolite. And I guess the story goes that, well, this beautiful young prostitute was murdered, and she was so beloved by all the miners in the town that even though the fine, upstanding townsfolk of Rhyolite wouldn't allow her to be buried in the official town cemetery, which is down the hill that way, well, I guess the miners all loved her so much that first they picked up her coffin and carried her around town, did a parade, and then they went and buried her right outside the red light district. And supposedly her grave is still there to this day, and people go there and leave all kinds of crazy stuff on it, like high heels and lipstick and beads and wine glasses. I don't know, there's supposed to be all kinds of cool stuff on this lonely prostitute's grave. And so I kind of thought, well, gosh, I should probably go visit that lonely prostitute's grave, you know? Because think about it, you know, in the gold rush days and the mining boom days, all these dudes came out west to try to, you know, make their fortune finding gold or silver or whatever. Well, it was all men. And, well, you know, men have needs. And so a certain brand of enterprising woman decided to come west as well and serve the men in whatever ways they could. And so there's a long, and you might even say proud, tradition of soiled doves, saloon girls, brothel girls in the West. And so for years, I've been meaning to come back here to Rhyolite and leave something on her grave. And to that end, I've been driving around, I'm not kidding, for probably 3 years now with this rose on my dashboard. I intended to bring this fake rose and lay it on the prostitute's grave, but, well, unfortunately, it's been on my dashboard in the blazing desert sun for 3 years, and it's not looking too good. But I got something even better. A golden space rose. That's right. I don't know if this was originally a real rose that was dipped in 24 karat gold or what, but it was given to me by a viewer. Very kind gift from a viewer. And the reason I called it a space rose is because I think like the science department at some university took it up, well, not into outer space, but inner space, like the very closest reaches, like up in the stratosphere. This rose was taken up into that part of space, but it's pretty solid, sturdy. So I thought this would be a better rose to leave on this prostitute's grave than that beat up old fabric rose. So if you're watching this video, Randy, I hope you're not offended that I'm going to leave this rose on this prostitute's grave. I enjoyed keeping it in my house, but I just feel like this is the ultimate, well, this is the ultimate thing to leave on a dead prostitute's grave. So that's what I'm going to do. Well, that is, if I can find the grave. Because as you might be able to see, Rhyolite is a pretty spread out town. I mean, there was thousands of people living here at one time, so there's a lot of open desert in between all these ruins. And, well, from what I was able to read online, this prostitute was supposedly buried just outside the red light district. So I have to try to figure out, I have to think like 100 years ago. Rhyolite boomed about 1908, I think. So I have to go back even farther than 100 years and try to think like they thought back then. And where would I put the red light district? Where would I bury a prostitute that the upstanding women folk in town wouldn't allow to be buried in the regular cemetery? So let me grab my rose and lock my car and set out to find this mysterious grave. Let's go. All that's really left here in Rhyolite today are those bank buildings. And so one of those was a bank. I think one of those might have been a stock exchange. Well, that doesn't really seem like a likely place for a red light district to be. You know, like the saloons and brothels, don't they usually put those over, you know, in like the rough part of town? Maybe over here by the railroad depot. You know, like how they say the wrong side of the tracks. Well, maybe the red light district was kind of over by the railroad depot because, you know, railroad depot, all kinds of people coming and going, and, you know, it just kind of seems maybe, well, it seems like as good a place to start as any. Wow, beautiful old railroad depot. Like I said, it served 3 different railroads. I think the Tonopah and Tidewater was one of them. There was a Bullfrog Railroad that went to Goldfield, and then I think there was one that went from Las Vegas to Tonopah. And all 3 of those railroads converged here, and that's why they built this super fancy depot. Which, if you can imagine what life was like in these mining camps back in the day, most people were just living in tents or very crude shelters. So a building like this would have been a big friggin' deal. And matter of fact, I think I read that, in today's dollars, this railroad depot cost something like, gosh, I want to say $3.7 million to build. It was a big fancy building. So, well, I don't know, maybe there wasn't a red light district near such a fancy railroad depot, but, well, let's just look. I mean, I'm guessing if people are leaving Mardi Gras beads and high heels and stuff on this grave, it seems like it would be pretty colorful, and you'd be able to see it standing out from this neutral colored desert landscape. I don't see anything. Another interesting thing about this old railroad depot, another fun fact, if you will, is that Rhyolite, like, people lived here until, like the 1920s. So it's fairly recently abandoned. And I think some guy moved out here and turned this railroad depot into a casino in the 1930s. That's right, it was called the Ghost Casino. Can you imagine an old casino in a ghost town? How amazing would that be? Okay, well, let's walk out into the desert back here behind the depot. Let's go over to that cabin and see if we notice anything. I mean, this does look like the kind of lonely little shanty where a prostitute might live and ply her trade. Actually, what I read about this prostitute, which, by the way, I should just stop referring to her as this prostitute. Her name was, well, she went by Mona Bell. Apparently her real name was Sarah, but she went by Sadie Haskett. But Mona Bell was her nom de prostitution, and so Mona Bell, she was only 20 years old, and, well, she was found dead, shot by her abusive minor boyfriend in her adobe cabin. So she didn't even have a wood-framed cabin like this. She lived in a very, it sounded pretty crude cabin made out of adobe mud. Like I was just saying, I mean, people lived in pretty rough, grim conditions in these mining camps. You know, like most of these ghost towns, they didn't go in and build fancy buildings like this because they knew they were just going to be there long enough to dig the gold or silver out of the hills, and then they were all just going to abandon the town anyways and leave. Rhyolite is pretty exceptional that it has those big 2-story structures in that fancy railroad depot. But most of the people in town were living in pretty squalid conditions, including this poor unfortunate, well, we'll call her Mona Bell since that was her prostitution name. Oh, look, could this be a clue? It's an old metal hairpin. Look at that. And it does look like a pretty old one. Like that could have been used to keep up one of those really beautiful old hairdos women had back in the day. You know, like the Gibson girl updo. Like, have you ever seen those really cool old Pepsi ads? Drink Pepsi Cola. And the lady has that big, puffy, awesome bouffant hairdo. They used hairpins like that to keep those up. So I wonder, well, this could have belonged to Mona Bell. But I better not take it with me because that would be a violation of the Antiquities Act. And, well, I'd have a bunch of feds on me with their guns drawn. So I'm just going to drop it right back down on the ground where I found it. And, well, keep on looking. all kind of crumbling ruins out here. I mean, aside from the fancy two-story structures, looks like there was a lot of buildings here. I mean, when I say Rhyolite was a big town, it was a big town. I mean, thousands of residents, they had a newspaper, they had a monthly magazine, they had a public swimming pool, they had electricity, they had piped plumbed water, they had an opera house, there was something like 50 saloons. I mean, it was a real city. Okay, now we're coming on kind of a pretty fancy building. Let's see what this was. Oh, miner's cabin. Oh, okay, this is actually pretty interesting. It says, this so-called miner's cabin was built using rubble and adobe construction. So when they described this poor prostitute's cabin as being adobe, well, maybe it wasn't quite as bad as I initially thought. I mean, I was thinking like a mud, well, like a mud cave sort of. This is actually pretty nice. Okay, so if a miner was living here, well, maybe we are kind of in the part of town where a prostitute would have lived. Oh, look, yeah, see, this says it was the Rhyolite jail. Let's see if we can go inside the jail cell. That would be interesting. You know, if we get inside the jail cell, then maybe we can think like a criminal and, well, we can put ourselves in the mindset of somebody who might have used the services of Miss Mona Bell. Oh, man, locked. Ugh. Okay, well, that means we can't get in the jail cell, which means we can't get into the mind of a 1908 gambling, brawling, drunkard, prostitute, frequenting ruffian. So that's not going to give us any help. But look at this! Hey, I just noticed there's another Park Service sign here, and it says Red Light District. Look at that! Ah, I knew I was in the right part of town. We did it. Okay, it says you are currently standing in the middle of Rhyolite's Red Light District. See, my process of deduction worked. Remember I said I thought it'd be kind of near. Well, to be honest though, we're pretty far from the train depot, and we are actually closer to the bank and the stock exchange. Now, what does that tell you about society? Anyway, it says here the Red Light District was designated between Colorado and Broadway Avenues and from Amargosa Street to the east. The establishments and the women who worked in them were segregated from the rest of the town. The women were discouraged from frequenting saloons and from living or even shopping outside the Red Light District. Some Rhyolite residents recalled the prostitutes as charitable and kind, but also as victims of easy money and bad fortune. Well, yeah, as regards this Mona Bell, whose grave I'm looking for, from what I was able to find out online, she left home relatively young, and I think she was married in Colorado. She was actually married to some guy in Colorado before she came out here to Rhyolite. And then once she got out here, I guess she hooked up with some miner who was apparently really violent and abusive and would beat the living crap out of her on a regular basis, and people even witnessed it. And, well, I guess she was working as a dance hall girl, which I'm not sure what's the difference between like a saloon girl, a dance hall girl, and a prostitute, but maybe it was just sort of a like a fuzzy continuum. Anyway, she was working as a dance hall girl, and she and another dance hall girl went in together. They both saved up their money, and they went in together and decided to open their own saloon. And so I think she had just opened, or they had just opened their new saloon when, gosh, her drunken miner, her abusive miner boyfriend came in the house one night. I think it was right after New Year's. Her boyfriend came home drunk and beat her up, and supposedly she was reaching up. She had like a pistol on the shelf that she was reaching up to get, and he shot her in the back of the head or in the back before she was able to get the gun. So, like that sign said, victim of easy money. I don't know about easy money. You probably had to work pretty hard as a dance hall girl, and I'm sure she had to work really hard to save up money to open her own saloon. But victim of bad fortune, yes, for sure. That sounds like it fits the bill totally. But hey, while I'm walking around here blathering to you, I just happened to see something in the distance. It looks like there's a bunch of shiny baubles and bangles, and I'm pretty sure that's it. We found the grave of Mona Bell. And I'm not just making this up for YouTube if you're skeptical. I have been to Rhyolite before. I had no idea this grave existed. I wasn't able to find any information online exactly where it was, so I really did use my deductive powers of reasoning that led me from the railroad depot to the old miner's cabin to the jail to the grave. Okay, wow, it is really windy out here today, and it's, I guess, windy out here often, so this grave is pretty trashed. You can see lots and lots of people have been by here over the years, and they've left her all kinds of things that a prostitute might need In the afterlife, plenty of high heels, green ones, sparkly ones, pointy ones, open-toed ones, pom-pom ones, and then of course there's lots and lots of Mardi Gras beads because, well, I guess there's nothing that screams prostitute like Mardi Gras beads. Gosh, look at some of the stuff on this grave. I mean, look at that creepy face. Somebody left that really haunting face on her grave. And there's a tube of lipstick next to her, an old hair clip, a little compact mirror. Anyway, in addition to high heels and Mardi Gras beads, apparently another thing a prostitute needs in the afterlife is booze, because there's quite a bit of booze here. We got a hard seltzer, we got a fifth of Canadian Club, we got a mini of Sutter's Home Chardonnay, something that's got a dollar bill marinating in it. So basically a little of this and a little of that. Ooh, even some cologne. And it's right next to somebody's room key. Look at this. Somebody left their room key at the Tuscany Hotel and Casino in Vegas on this prostitute's grave. Wow. I mean, I don't know about you, but if the ghost of a 100-year dead prostitute showed up in my room in Vegas one night, well, I don't know. That might be actually kind of interesting. Oh my God, what are these? It's like super tiny old little high heels. What on God's green earth? Look at that. I mean, are these like antique shoes? They're teeny tiny. I mean, it fits on the palm of my hand. I don't know anybody who had feet this small unless it was one of those poor Chinese women that had their feet bound. And this does look like a really old shoe. And it's too big for a doll. I hate to think what that was from. I'm going to put it right back on the grave. Anyway, it's actually pretty cool and kind of heartening that this many people take the time to come out to this lonely prostitute's grave and leave things. Because it really is on the edge of town. I mean, all the main buildings that people stop at are way back there. You know, the railroad depot, and then, well, you can't even see that fancy bank building. It's behind the jail. But, you know, I would guess most people maybe come to the jail and don't go any further than that, especially because there's this big ditch running right through the desert. And, well, you know, there's signs warning you about rattlesnakes. And, well, let's just be honest, most Americans don't even like to walk 5 feet down the hallway to their refrigerator. So, yeah, I'm impressed that this many people have been out here and took the time to leave makeup, shoes, alcohol on this woman's grave. That's cool. Oh, look at this. I thought this was going to be another beer, but it's a iced espresso. Definitely need one of those in the afterlife. Oh, and I just noticed it's tucked into the toe of a really fancy sparkly slipper. Slippers! Aww. I mean, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be wearing high heels in the afterlife. I mean, it's supposed to be paradise, and, well, if you've ever worn high heels, you know that it's not very comfortable. And I would much rather go traipsing around heaven in a nice, comfy pair of slippers. Now, I think a lot of this preservation work was done by the Red Hat Society out of Pahrump. You know, have you ever heard of the Red Hat ladies? It's kind of like a social group for, I think, women over the age of 55. They all get together and they wear these really fancy outfits, red and purple with these big red hats. Well, I guess they heard about this poor lonely prostitute's grave out here way on the edge of Rhyolite that no one ever cared about. And, well, they came out here and I think they built the little fence around it. And they're probably the ones who put this cross up, which I'm kind of confused because, well, I can't even read what it says. Isabel Haskins, a.k.a. Oh, that probably says Mona Bell. Okay, so Isabel Haskins, a.k.a. Mona Bell. Well, I find that puzzling because according to my research that I read online, her name was Sarah, but she went by Sadie. Sadie, I guess, was the nickname for Sarah back then. And her last name was Haskett, not Haskins. So, I don't know. Something's fishy here. Okay, actually, there's a lot fishy here. I'll be honest with you. I've known this since I started recording this video. I've known it for a while now. In fact, I've known about it ever since I first heard about this prostitute's grave. This isn't actually the grave of a prostitute. I mean, as much as it might look like the grave of a prostitute, it's pure, unadulterated bunk. I guess the story is that that fancy depot that we were at earlier, well, remember how I said a guy either bought it or just came out here and squatted in it and turned it into a casino called the Ghost Casino? Well, he ran it as a casino until he died, and then his sister and her husband came out here and kind of ran it as more of a gift shop. And they sort of retired out here, and they lived out here, I guess, in that old railroad depot, which, oh my God, wouldn't that be amazing? Anyway, his sister and her husband lived out here as sort of, I guess, unofficial caretakers of Rhyolite. Now, remember, this was back in the I guess it would have been the late 30s, early 40s. Before Death Valley was a national park, before this was part of Death Valley, it was just some lonely, dusty little ghost town. But that was also early in the automobile age, and people were just getting started driving their fancy new Fords around the backcountry, going to Death Valley, going to ghost towns, exploring. And so all these tourists would come out here to Rhyolite. You know, even back in the 1920s, 1930s, and certainly in the 1940s when this couple was living here. And so, you know, the wife, she knew that people like a good story. And so she basically made this whole thing up. Yes, there was a prostitute by the name of the nom de prostitution of Mona Bell, and she was shot and killed, shot by her abusive, drunken minor boyfriend here in Rhyolite just after New Year's, I think 1908. But she is certainly not buried here. This woman, Sarah, Sadie, Isabel, Haskins, Haskett, whatever her name was, she left home in Washington State. She moved to Colorado, married somebody there. I guess it didn't work out because she left him and came out here to Rhyolite, started working as a, well, you know what, met the abusive minor guy. He shot and killed her. Well, when she died, I mean, apparently I guess she was kind of popular in town because people cared enough about her to call her ex-husband in Colorado. Well, I guess they had telephone service here. So yeah, they called him up or sent him a telegraph, whatever. And he actually came out here and escorted her remains all the way back up to Washington State, where she was originally from. And her family buried her up in Washington State, not here in Rhyolite. Although I just noticed there is a Park Service sign here. Let's see what this says. Look. Mona Bell's grave. Okay, this was placed here by the Bureau of Land Management, aka the federal government, and we know the federal government would never lie to us. So let's see what they have to say about Mona Bell. The story of Mona Bell is not an uncommon one. Women like her could be found throughout mining camps of the West. What is uncommon about Mona's story is how her very public death allowed her tale to be told in a time when the identities of most working women were obscured by a string of aliases and a tendency to never stay in one place too long. Mona Bell was born Sarah Isabella Peterman. Okay, so I guess she was Sarah and Isabella. We were both kind of right. Peterman, I didn't know that. October 1887 in Nebraska. When she was 15, her family moved to Seattle. Okay, so she was from Washington. Soon after she graduated high school in 1906, she met and married Clinton Columbus Heskett. So her last name was Heskett, her married name. I was right. And they settled in Arrow, Colorado, where by all accounts, Isabel was a dutiful wife. In 1907, her husband was accused of forging checks, and he quickly left town. On his way out, he asked his friend Fred Skinner to look out for Isabel. Fred and Isabel quickly fell in love and headed west, causing trouble along the way. Isabel was arrested for vagrancy for combative behavior in saloons. Oh, she was feisty. She was a fighter. And Fred gambled heavily in every town. Okay, wow, they sound like a real Bonnie and Clyde. So basically, her husband ran out of town or had to leave town because of forging checks. He asked his friend Fred to keep an eye on his wife. They hooked up and took off for parts unknown. Sounds like wreaking all kinds of havoc along the way. Anyway, it goes on to say that gold and silver drew them to central Nevada. She first became a working girl in Fallon. Then they moved to Manhattan, Nevada, where Isabel, now going by the name of Mona Bell, worked at the Parlor Saloon in the red light district. Then a month after they arrived in Manhattan, Mona and Fred were arrested for allegedly robbing one of Mona's clients. Oh gosh, she doesn't actually sound like such a great person after all. Anyway, this sign goes on to talk about how they were arrested for this and arrested for that, and they punched this person and knocked out that person and stole this, and well, she soon found employment in Rhyolite's Adobe Dance Hall and changed her name to Norma. A local newspaper stated she drank and smoked and swore like a pirate. Okay, well, she does kind of sound fun, I'll say that. Fred was released from jail. He and Mona continued down a turbulent path. On January 3rd, 1908, Fred ran down the street screaming that he had shot Mona, and Mona had shot him. Mona died that night. Okay, yeah, I did read that in my research that he claimed that she had tried to shoot him first and he knocked the gun out of her hand. And then she had a second gun up on that shelf that she was reaching for. And that's when he shot her out of self-defense. Now, when I read his account at first, I was like, oh, please. It sounds like he's just making up some excuse. Assuming this sign is accurate, though, it sounds like they had a pretty turbulent backstory. And, well, it does seem a little bit more believable to me. Anyway, it says, as a small crowd formed in the daylight, rumblings of anger built in Rhyolite. Even though Mona was a prostitute, many felt she was a kindly woman who had been led astray by Fred Skinner. Fred was sentenced to first-degree murder and life in prison. After news of Mona's death reached her family, her estranged husband Heskett traveled to Rhyolite to claim her body. She was put to rest in the Peterman family plot at the Crown Hill Cemetery in Ballard, Washington. Many years after the deaths of Mona and Rhyolite, Mrs. Herschel Heisler, who ran a museum and gift shop, built Mona's false grave here at the edge of town and told tourists that Mona wasn't buried in the town cemetery because of her profession. And there's a picture of her real grave up in Ballard, Washington. Okay, wow! I'll be a monkey's uncle. The federal government got it right. I mean... Well, as much as I know what the truth is, as much as any of us know what the truth is in these strange times of post-truth, they confirmed pretty much everything I had read about her. I mean, I didn't know she was quite the hellraiser that they paint her to be here, but they're honest. They tell you that's not her real grave. So I think that's actually pretty cool. And I actually think it doesn't even really matter. You know, this grave is really more of a symbol, especially being right outside Vegas. This ghost town is only about 90 minutes outside Las Vegas. And, well, as you can see from that hotel room key, a lot of people from Vegas come out here. Maybe people did stuff that they aren't too proud of having done the night before. And so they leave things on this grave almost as like an offering or a means of atonement, if that makes any sense. So I guess I might as well leave my rose somewhere on the grave in amongst all them high heels, beads, booze bottles, and makeup containers. Why not? I mean, there are already plenty of roses here on her cross, but those are fabric. They won't last long. This rose here will stand the test of time. And, well, to be honest, I don't just want to tuck it in the fence because I feel like it'll blow away. I was going to say it's bad luck to climb over the fence and climb on someone's grave, but it's not a real person's grave. It's just a fake grave, so I'm going to go ahead and hop over the fence, and I'm going to stick this rose very securely into the ground in a place of honor. There. That ought to do her. I stuck that rose into the ground as deep as I could and piled up some rocks on the base. And I don't think it's gonna go anywhere. So now when people come to pay their respects at the grave of Mona Bell, well, they'll see that beautiful, shiny, golden space rose glimmering in the desert sun. And matter of fact, if you come out to Rhyolite, well, come on by, check out this fake grave, and say hello to my little friend for me. Just please don't steal it. I left it here for Mona. Anyway, that's pretty much all there is to the story of Mona Bell's fake grave at Rhyolite Ghost Town. I feel pretty good about having left that rose there, even if it is a fake grave. I don't know. Like I said, it's symbolic more than anything. It's just cathartic. It's a way of leaving something there to atone for whatever misdeeds you might have done the night before. And well, I didn't do any misdeeds the night before, or the week before, or the year before, for that matter. I try to be a pretty honorable person, but I'm sure well, let's face it, I've done plenty in my life that I probably need to atone for, so let that little golden space rose stand as an offering to the desert skies and the sun to smile down upon me and continue to bless me as I've already been so very blessed. So that was Rhyolite's Mona Bell Memorial. And you know what I think is most interesting about this whole story? Well, you don't see any memorials at all, fake or real, at either this bank or that stock exchange. She might have been just a prostitute, but apparently people care more about a prostitute than they do a banker.